Well, hello everyone. We're making today's video from the Conservative Party conference in Manchester. There's been a lot of discussion has been going around here over the last couple of days about Brexit and the way the European Union have been treating the UK during the whole process, and Remainers and the way they're planning to try their best to stop Brexit. Now, as you know, yesterday, Sunday, the newspapers broke the story that the number of Remainers have been essentially colluding and plotting with the European Union to try to block the will of the people and democracy in Britain. The story came out that Number 10 are now looking into investigating Remainer MPs who have been in secret talks with Brussels and the European Union. The government is working on extensive investigations into Dominic Grieve, Oliver Letwin, Hilary Benn, and their involvement with foreign powers and the funding of their activities. Governments have proper rules for drafting legislation, but nobody knows what organizations are pulling these strings. Now, this is serious stuff because it's now moved on from trying to use the House of Commons votes to delay or force the Prime Minister to ask for an extension from the European Union. This is actually making a move against your own country, not just the vote, the whole country. Now, all this is because Boris Johnson has been going around saying that we will leave at the end of October. This is despite the Benn bill that will force the government to ask for an extension from the European Union in case we don't have a deal. Now, firstly, as I said before, I don't think a deal is possible at this point because the House of Commons is absolutely divided. It's a bit of chaos out there. And so deal, not going to happen. Even if it's the best deal ever, we're not going to be tied to anything, customs union, ECJ. I don't think anyone's going to be voting for that, at least one side. Now, if you don't have a deal, obviously they're going to force you to ask for an extension, and Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson have hinted that they will not be asking for an extension. They will find a way not to do it. So what Remainer MPs have been doing is that they've been colluding with foreign powers, and they want to have new plans in case Boris Johnson ignores the Benn bill. And one way is to get the Speaker of the House of Commons, John Bercow, the person whose job is to stay neutral and balanced, the person whose job is to essentially chair the sessions in House of Commons, but in reality, he's a Remain activist trying to find a way to go against the will of the people and the democratic vote of 17.4 million people. As well as giving John Bercow the power to ask for an extension instead of Boris Johnson's government, the rebels have also discussed using a legislation to give Mr. Bercow the power to appoint a new British commissioner to the EU, with pro-Remain former Home Secretary Amber Rudd being one of the candidates. Under this new plan, the Commons will sit on the 19th of October to pass a new bill giving Mr. Bercow the power to write the letter for an extension. But last night, Number 10 Downing Street had hit back after claims from senior sources that Oliver Letwin and Philip Hammond have agreed to a specific date when it comes to the Benn bill with the French embassy in London. Now, seriously, foreign embassies. These people are now having secret talks with other countries' embassies in London in order to decide what's right for the people of this country. Now, they're having secret meetings in the French embassy in London, and now they're talking with sources in Germany and everywhere else. I don't know who's going to stop these people. I'm hoping that Downing Street seriously look into this investigation and find a way. As I said, we're here at conference today, and towards the end of the video, I'm going to actually go out there and ask the members and the people who are attending this conference to see what they think about what's been going on and what's the prospect for this country and Brexit. Now, before we get there, this morning on Monday the 30th of September, John Bercow has decided to make another move against the Conservative government. According to Guido Fawkes, the Speaker is organising a meeting of party leaders today in Westminster, whilst another party, the Conservative Party, is having their conference in Manchester. So not only last week, the other parties, Remainer parties, voted not to give the Conservatives a short recess to have their conference, but obviously Boris Johnson said, you don't want to give me a recess? It's fine. We're still going to have our conference anyway. Not only they did that, but now that we're here in Manchester discussing a number of issues, not just Brexit, but everything that's related to the country, Remainer MPs are plotting in London, in Westminster. They're having their own meetings. They invited all the opposition leaders, Jeremy Corbyn, Joe Swinson and the SNP, because we're not there. Now, this isn't the first time that Remainers have been plotting with the European Union. Tony Blair lobbied the EU for a Brexit delay as he led the new call to have a second referendum. Blair personally urged the EU's chief negotiator to delay Brexit beyond the 29th of March, as Theresa May was insisting to European leaders that she wanted the UK to leave on time. The former Prime Minister held a private meeting with Michel Barnier in February, in which he declared that an extension of the Article 50 notice period would provide the time required for clarifying the type of relationship Britain wanted with the European Union. At the time, he was leading the calls for a second referendum. Mr. Blair's intervention at a one-to-one meeting in Munich came as Mrs. May was urging EU leaders to offer concessions that would allow the UK to leave on its intended exit date of the 29th of March. So basically, Blair went to the EU and said that let's have some sort of delay because we need to make sure we want the best relationship and we have to clarify what sort of relationship we want. At the same time, he was the one who was leading the campaign for a second referendum to cancel Brexit. So we know what the plan was. And this is the same thing right now. We know what John Bercow wants. We know what Dominic Grieve wants. These people don't really want to clarify a better relationship. They don't want any better relationship. They don't want any freedom for this country. All they want is to have the European national state international state for the whole continent. Now that's interesting because what Blair was essentially doing is that on the one hand he was having secret meetings with the EU to get them to give us a delay because he said we need to clarify what sort of relationship we want to make sure we have a good relationship with the EU after Brexit. But at the same time, he was the one who was leading the campaign to have a second vote and to essentially cancel Brexit. It's the same thing that's been happening now with John Bercow, Dominic Grieve, Philip Hammond and the other Labour and Lib Dem Remainers. They say that they're having all these talks to make sure that we find the best option for the country. In reality, they just want to completely ignore the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit. And as I said earlier, every poll and survey shows that we should stop saying 17.4 million because it's no longer just 52%. There's a huge chunk of the 48% who voted Remain who are now Brexiteers. They are sick and tired of these people. Now, as we get closer to the end of October, the Remainer MPs are using every tool that they have to essentially make a move against democracy in this country. One new idea is to add an amendment to any upcoming snap election to allow 16-year-olds to vote. Now, we know why Labour and Lib Dems want 16-year-olds to vote. They've been using the last few years to feed them wrong information and ill-informed data about politics and the state of country. So don't be surprised if a lot of 16-year-olds will vote to revoke Article 50 or basically to remain in the European Union. And that's their plan, to make sure that they do get enough votes on their side.
Another bit of chatter about what the Commons might do over the next few weeks is reduce the voting age to 16. Is that possible?
I've not heard that chatter, but I think it's absolutely...
Would you like to see that?
I would like to see votes at 16 because it was something as a young mum myself when I was a mum at 16 and as a trade unionist I thought was a really important policy to take forward, you know. I think that 16-year-olds are responsible enough to make decisions about voting. They could join the army, they can have children.
You'd like to see
I think they should be able
which
to
could
do
affect
that.
the next election if you brought it in now to take the vote down to 16.
I absolutely agree with that policy.
Big boost for the Labour Party, of course.
I absolutely have always agreed, even before as a Member of Parliament, and it was my colleague Jim McMahon from Oldham who put that legislation forward. I absolutely approve of that.
They don't care about teenagers. They don't care about anyone in this country. All they care about is their own personal agenda, and they're more than happy to use anyone that they can to get there. Now, as I promised, we're going to go out there now to the party conference and have a quick conversation with a few people to see what they think about the state of Brexit and if we're actually going to be leaving. Let's see if they are optimistic or pessimistic.
Do you think Brexit's going to happen?
It's going to definitely happen, October the 31st. No ifs, no buts.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's going to be very difficult for him not to put it through. I mean, ultimately it'll be the end of the Tory party, and the Brexit party will move in and hammer them in the next election. So ultimately it's got to happen. So I think it will.
I'm hopeful it will. I think that we're really motivated. Everyone in the party seems to be working more towards it. But I am also cautious that time is running out and the parliamentary arithmetic is very difficult. But I am still hopeful that it will happen by the deadline.
Most likely be no deal Brexit, but it was down to the MPs in Parliament who want to stop Brexit. I think it was their fault, and I think I'll be happy about it.
Do you think Brexit will happen?
No.
Why not?
I think Remain MPs will essentially vote in the Commons to stop it in any form necessary to do so, and therefore by stopping no deal they'll legislate against Brexit.
What do you think of the Remainer MPs having secret talks with the EU?
I think it should be on the front of every Tory leaflet. Every constituency should be that your opposition MPs try to vote to undermine the democratic will of the British people.
What do you think of Remainer MPs having secret talks with EU leaders?
I think it's backstabbing and I think it's wrong. I don't agree with it, and I think there should be punishments for
any MP who is acting as though that vote shouldn't have happened, or it doesn't count, is going against their role, their responsibility. So I'm devastated that this is happening, and I think that we need an election to get rid of any MP who doesn't understand what their actual job is, and get people in who do.
Well, I'd call them traitors, but we're not allowed to say that anymore.
What do you call them then?
Traitors.
Well, as we saw, a lot of people are still optimistic about the prospects of Brexit. And as Boris Johnson said, we shall never surrender. And speaking of which, if you want to check out the new t-shirts that we've made, the Never Surrender t-shirts, the link is in the description. We also have other designs, Parliament, People versus Parliament and everything else. Just check it out. And tomorrow we have Steve Baker as a special guest on this channel. I'll be interviewing him. The video should be up at 5:45 tomorrow, Tuesday. And have a great day. I will be around Tory conference and keep you updated for the next few days.